Heiniger UK Handpiece Maintenance, how to check for signs of wear. So the first thing we can do is try and move the inner and outer parts apart to check to see if that spring is lazy. We can take the ferrule off with multi-grips on the knurled side of the ferrule, check inside the ferrule to make sure there's no gunk build up inside of there that needs cleaning out. We're going to take the back end out and start from the back end to the front end looking for signs of wear. So I'm just using a cog spanner to take that inner cog off, and once I've got that off, I will check to see if there's any sharp edges, shiny sharp edges on those teeth that would indicate wear. Similarly with the cog on the outer half, I'll do the same thing, and while I'm there I'm going to turn this worm or pin drive around and put it back into the bearing on the other side and just move it around and see if it wobbles about. If it does, it would indicate that those bearings are failing and need to be replaced. From here, we'll take the back joint spring off and caps, checking the caps to make sure there's grease inside there. If there isn't grease inside there, what it's going to do is it will wear, or prematurely wear, by not having grease in there, prematurely wear these two parts. So I've put them back together. They're quite easy to put back together. I'm just checking to see any wear. The back joint cover, we want to make sure there's no splits on the back joint cover. And inside this barrel now, there is a labyrinth seal. And if I just get in between where the circlip ends meet, you'll see just there, I can take this labyrinth seal off without creasing it, which is important. I'll explain that in a little while. So the front bearing is attached to the crank, and by moving the crank around, I can check the condition of that front bearing. If it moves around a lot, it would mean that it is badly worn. Comb screws, I'm going to check for hairline cracks on the comb screws, and then I'm going to hold the fork body down on top of the post and cup and move it in and out. I'm just trying to see if there's any movement in there, because I'm looking for wear that would be similar to that. If you can see the back of that post there, and you can see inside of the cup, and the post is almost worn through to the back of that center post cup, and so I'm looking for this wear. The main reason for that is just not putting enough oil or not oiling frequently the post and cup, and then that's what that little hole is for, to get the oil inside there. From here, we can take the tension nut off and check inside for oil or grease. Make sure there isn't any in there, because what that will do is create a hydraulic effect which will affect your cut. We want to make sure that the sleeve is traveling freely and evenly up and down and from side to side, rotating from side to side. We want to check the pin, and the easiest way to do that is to compare it with a new pin, which I'd urge you to buy when you buy a new handpiece, because that'll give you a good template for how badly this pin is wearing. From here, we can take the chicken feet out by turning them 90 degrees. We want to check to make sure that there's no slop in the chicken feet and that they can rotate freely. So 90 degrees, and that will come out. The fork stop screw sometimes is difficult to get out. The easiest way is to get a drift and a hammer. Hit it twice, doesn't have to be really hard. It just gives it a bit of a shock, and then you're able to get the screwdriver onto it. Don't keep persevering with the screwdriver. You'll just burr over the screwdriver slot. So from here we can take our fork body and our crank roller or ball out, check for wear inside that race. And while we're here, what we need to do is check the crank, because at the back of the crank there, between the ball and the crank, a little bit of wool can wind around the crank spindle, and that'll affect the handpiece as well. So get a little needle and flick that off if you see that. That's quite common. So from this point here, we can't go any further unless we start replacing parts, because if I move the post, I've got to replace it with the post and the cup, and if I move the bearings, I've got to replace them as well. So putting the handpiece back together again is just simply reversing the process. the outer and inner half we'll put together. We'll re-grease our caps and put them back on. Once the caps are on, we just align that spring, and I'm just trying to lever that spring up onto that cap and then turn the back joint over and move that other spring on top of the cap with a little bit of persuasion. The spline worm or pin drive back in, and then this seal here, we want that lip to go and face the back of the handpiece, and we want to put it on the inner half first, not into the barrel first. If we did put it into the barrel first, then when we go to put the inner half in, we can crease, it's possible to crease that seal, and that will tighten the back end up. And in this travel, so that's the way I'm winding it, is how tight the barrel, the back end could be inside that handpiece, which is you're not going to have a happy time. So the crank roller or ball, the flat side needs to go to the back of the handpiece. Then we can put our fork body in. The fork stop screw, start that off by hand, not with the screwdriver. They're easy to misthread and not impossible to fix after that, but not easy either. So start that off by hand. We'd grease the chicken feet and put them back in. I'd put grease in the sleeve if you weren't oiling it regularly. The tension nut can go back on because we've cleaned that out. We haven't found any hairline cracks in the comb screws. Oil hole cap and ferrule. Now we'll put some worn parts on our sights to show you what to look for, apart from the postman cup that I've just shown you. And happy shearing.